Yes, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance Podcast. In today's episode, we are joined by Warren Bradley, who is the founder of a wearable blood flow restriction-based company, Hytro, okay? And what you're going to get in this episode, just to give you a nice, summary, blurb, whatever you call it, in this podcast, it's what I would describe as a case study of Warren's time, okay? So it's kind of a step-by-step, a little bit of a timeline of, when Warren identified that there was a thing that was lacking, okay? So he found a problem that blood flow restriction training just wasn't accessible, and how he's gone about creating solutions and inventing a product that is now absolutely everywhere, okay? So he's gone from this place of being, somebody really new in the business world. And he says at the beginning, he was a nutritionist who didn't know much about business. But as you go through this, you're going to be like, wow, if you didn't know much at the start, you were seriously upskilled and your knowledge base is sick, and it's super cool. So throughout this episode, we're not going to speak about sets and reps and, intensity or the science of blood flow restriction. So what we're going to do is put in an article that Hytro have published in the show notes below. So go and check that out if you're looking at, using blood flow restriction in the future. And then potentially you might want to buy one of Hytro's products. Okay. But yeah, so we're not going to cover the sets, reps, and intensities, but you're going to get a really kind of real world kind of conversation and almost an interview in a sense of somebody that's founded a company and is going through the problem solving process every day. In terms of raising money, inventing a product, going through patents, establishing a network and looking back and reflecting on all the things that has got him to this point and got his team to this point. So for me, really nice episode. I think as a startup business, ourselves with Adapt, it's super cool to hear somebody else speaking about their journey. And there's definitely a lot of parallels, even though it is a different products that we are delivering. So what I want you to do then, off the back of this episode, is go to Hytro, go to Warren's Instagram, which is Warren_Hytro. Go and check him out, super friendly guy, just giving up an hour of his time off the bat, just to kind of speak to me around this. So lovely bloke. I know a few people who know him who also say he's a lovely bloke. So yeah, this is why I love this podcast as well. Just great having conversations with people that otherwise you wouldn't potentially have a reason to speak to or an opportunity to speak to. So for me, man, I say this all the time, but absolute dream job. Absolutely chuffed I'm in this situation. So cool. Without further ado, let's get into the podcast with Warren. Hello, Warren. How's it going, mate? You okay?
Good, Jordan. How are you, buddy? Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you for joining me. You've been on my radar for a little while. I listened to you on, I forgot his name now, but PT podcast a while ago, and I really enjoyed it. So I was like, I need to get him on just to kind of share his story and everything like that.
Yeah, he's a great guy, isn't he? When was that? That was about 3 or 4 months ago, I think, wasn't it? So
yes.
Yeah, that was good fun. Well, I'm really pleased to be here because I've not done one of these in a while, so it's good to refresh and reflect again on what's been going on the past year or so. So yeah,
Awesome. So just to begin with, mate, for people that don't know who you are, can you just give us, an intro as to who you are and where you've kind of been and what you've done?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to keep it whistle stops tour. So essentially, I did a PhD at LJMU, so that was in exercise physiology with a strand of nutrition. I did that while simultaneously working in professional sports, so kind of one of them blended PhDs. So I worked, to begin with, at Munster Rugby, who match funded my PhD with LJMU, which is great. That was under Professor Graham Close, who was the head of nutrition at the time. I went in as a full-time nutritionist, so I did 2 years there. I then moved on to England Rugby Sevens, so I did that for quite a while. That was 4.5, 5 years. I was the head of nutrition there, which was an amazing gig. Simultaneously completing the PhD as well. For the record, that took me 5 years. It took me quite a while, but it was because it was blended part-time and full-time kind of throughout those years. Then I moved on to work in various different rugby union, rugby league clubs, and then transitioned finally into football. And I completed my PhD and finished the write-up in 2016, had 4 publications going into the Viva, and then finished the Viva in 2017. So that was great. And then I guess what happened was I got a little bit of itchy feet working in sports. I absolutely loved it, but I was driving a lot and I was just thinking, what else could I do, at that point in time? And I'd seen a technique called blood flow restriction training, or occlusion training, as some people know it, used for rehabilitation purposes. And it really kind of triggered my interest because it was quite deep physiology, muscle physiology and mechanisms at play. So I wanted to understand what was happening to regenerate these players so quickly for rehab purposes. And once I dived into it, it was nuts. There was like 6,000 or 7,000 research papers proving the efficacy, the safety. There was literally nothing that showed it didn't work, as opposed to other things which are quite ambiguous, for and against. This was concrete, it worked very well. And what I couldn't understand was why it wasn't more widely used. So it got my brain cogs turning, and I just had a light bulb moment where I thought, well, if we can make this technique that's extensively proven more accessible for everyone, then of course there's a huge market here, a huge industry that we can help, whether that's elite athletes for performance, whether that's elderly or medical, for rehabilitation. There's so many people we could help with an accessible device. So again, long story short, created the company Hytro, applied for a patent for the concept, and now we're 4 years later into the business.
Exciting, mate. That's mad.
There you go.
No, it's good. So with that, as I was thinking through this podcast, and I was thinking through, what I know about Hytro and how you've basically created this thing. You've seen this problem of, okay, it's not very accessible, but the mechanisms and everything behind it makes sense. That light bulb moment, how did that come about? Like, was it a mind map situation, or was you just in the shower? Did you wake up in the middle of the night? What was that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'll be completely transparent here. So I drove a lot for consultancies for clubs. So I was living in Liverpool, working a whole city. So that was the best part of 5-hour drive a day. I was working at Derby County, the best part of 4 to 5 hours because of traffic on the M6. And then I was working at England Rugby Sevens as well, once a month for a few days. So my transit time was ridiculous. So I had a lot of thinking time in the car. I did initially just podcast it up or listen to kind of research podcasts, or, sometimes throw in the odd, fun one, or Joe Rogan, for example. But to the point where I was like, I could use this time quite effectively. So I just started, honestly, just for hours and hours and hours a day for weeks and weeks and possibly months, just was thinking of ways to innovate. And it could have been anything. I even came up with a bar concept, like going out drinking, like axe throwing type thing. I was thinking of concepts like that. I was going through everything, but it always boiled back down to my expertise, which was obviously science, exercise physiology, and it made most sense for me to look in that direction. And to be honest, once I got on that path, blood flow restriction was something that quite early on came up in my head because the problem was evident. I knew what the problem was. It was problem solving that took me a while, and I'd say I probably put a good 150 hours into this thinking process, because there's a hell of a lot that goes into it. It's not just as simple as how does this product look. It's how do you get this to market? How do you build a team? I wasn't a businessman, but I was a scientist working in professional sports, essentially. So how do you transition from that into business? And what I quickly realized was the idea was really good. It was concrete. I did think through a lot of angles through this product. And that was, the integration of BFR technology within sportswear to circumvent some of the user barriers. So what I did, because I didn't know how to create a business, what I did was I applied for a patent so I could protect the idea with the view to finding people who could help me on that journey. And inevitably what was just throughout my career progression, I started working with some pretty impressive individuals down in London. It was a company called Goalmaster Fitness. So they essentially look after CEOs of company, corporate lawyers, high net worth individuals for their strength conditioning, nutrition, blood mapping, stuff like that, the health and wellness. Excuse me. So I was employed as the head of nutrition. And after maybe 2 or 3 months of working with the CEO and the owner of the company, I realized quickly they had a passion for this, but they had a huge skill set in management and a massive black book in London because they were well-established individuals down in London. So I pitched them the idea. I essentially said, look, I've got this idea. I don't know what to do with it. I work in this industry. There's definitely room for it, and there's definitely a need for this product. It's patent pending. What do you think? And essentially, what's ended up happening is they actually wound down that business, and we've all gone full time with Hytro. Well, that was a few years ago. So the idea was that good, essentially, that an industry that never even heard of blood flow restriction, or a device I'd never even heard of, they've wound down their own company to come on board with this and start it with me. So it must have been a pretty compelling story. I think it was the patent. I think that was the best decision I ever made.
What was the, because I literally know nothing about this, mate. This is a full education, workshop for me. The process of getting a patent, what's that look like? Is that lengthy? Is that pretty simple? How do you go about and does it protect? Yeah, I literally have no idea what it does and what it doesn't do. Could you upskill us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Again, going into it, I had no idea either. So I met HGF, I think they're called. Yeah, the HGF in Leeds, so they're a patent lawyer's office. And essentially, I came to him with the idea, and I just booked a consultation. It's a free consultation, and they were fantastic. A guy called Chris Vaughan there, I think he's the owner or one of the directors. He just sat with me for an hour and worked through and teased out information from the idea and gave me some advice on how we should write the patent, what I thought about that. And then essentially, once you have that kind of mind map or that framework, you then either solicit them to do the work or you don't. And it costs best part of $5,000, just over actually, to do that body of work and submit it to the patent office. But that's not where it stops. So that does take a while, that first bit, but then there is examiners. They have to look at the patent, look at prior arts, look at prior patents that could be similar. Are you infringing on someone else's patent? You don't know this until you submit. So you can do a search, or they can do a search, but they don't have all of the information until they actually submit the patent application. Because some are pending, some are published but not granted, some are granted, so it's a bit of a murky field. So yeah, once I put it in with Chris, essentially, I then met the guys at Hytro. So that's when we started making this process took 2 years for the UK patent to come through, with various back and forth with examiners and questions on prior art. So, for example, there was a device in America where there's a load of essentially blood flow restriction straps were everywhere, so tourniquets around parts of the limb, and it was for gunshot wounds or wounds essentially as a tourniquet. So they had integrated some way of compressing an artery basically at all sorts of points in the limb. So again, that has to be questioned, like, is our art novel? Is it different to that? And obviously it is completely different because we don't restrict arterial blood flow, and it's very specifically proximal on the limb.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one in Japan where they had a belt that you could attach to attachments on the arm and the legs. I believe it was just the arms. And that essentially did something similar, but it wasn't integrated. So our patent obviously covers the integration of blood flow restriction tech by any means, whether that's Velcro, whether that's buttons, whether that's magnets, whatever, or even pneumatic devices. It's integrated within sportswear. So yeah, we had to go through that process and answer why it was novel.
Yeah.
So I think it was 2.5 years, something like that, for the UK patent to be granted, and we're still waiting for international patents. So there's, Australia, America, Brazil, all over the place, all over the world we've filed. Again, a great expense, 5 to 10K for each of those, and expenses back and forth to answer the examiners. Now, they should be coming in the next 12 to 24 months. They take roughly 5-6 years to get those, and we applied for them back in 2018. They should be coming in pretty imminently, but this takes time. It takes time. Yeah. However, I will say that there is protection, because if you've applied for a patent, you preserve your filing date. So once you've preserved your filing date, say June 2018, if anyone else submits a patent or creates a product that's the same or similar and infringes that patent, once that patent is granted, you can then obviously you take it to court and obviously claim everything back from them. So you just wouldn't bother making a product in a field where there's a patent pending, because, if they get that patent, you're screwed, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, essentially. So that protects us from the big boys, your Adidas, Under Armours. They're miles better off purchasing Hytro, because obviously, well, first of all, there'd be an IP battle, but secondly, well, they don't want to obviously step on toes because it looks bad in this moral world that we live in as well. But also there's something called patent box. It really gives them a tax relief on any products they sell that are patented. So if they get, say, 20% out of their VAT relieved, say that's 10 million a year, and that's tiny for them. They would just rather buy a couple of hours and obviously just see that benefit and upside.
Got you. Mate, that's mad. And I think straight away, what I'm kind of getting from you, you said previously how you wasn't a businessman, and now you're just kind of spitting all this stuff about patent and tax relief, and that's huge, huge stuff. And it just seems like a whole nother world to me away from where I am, and probably everybody in the world that hasn't gone through your process of creating a business and inventing. With all of that, like, some of the things I was thinking is, me and the missus are going through the process of buying a house at the moment, and everyone's kind of giving me the same advice, like, don't get your hopes up until you've got the keys. Is there an element of was there an element of fear in your mind as you were going through that patent process? Like, I've got to get it through to protect it, or we should just whatever will be, will be. What was your mindset there?
Yeah, again, really good question. So absolutely. So I actually went between the meeting with Chris and actually filing for the patent was probably a year. And the reason was it was a big upfront cost for me. I wasn't in London earning big bucks. I was doing okay up north, but I think it was like a $5,000 outlay. I was like, look, that's quite a bit of my savings. So look, I've got to really want to do this, and I needed to know, was there a market for this? So I actually just sat on it, and then what happened was, you may have seen, you may have not, but BFR's on a massive upward trend, and it started back in 2018. Well, it probably started before that, to be honest, but I really started to see it more prevalently on my socials. The research, the literature was compounding every year. The last 2 years has been 1,260 papers published in blood flow restriction. That's so much, just the last 2 years. So what we're seeing is this massive upwards exponential curve, basically. And I started to see it, and I was like, shit, I need to file that patent immediately, because it's a good idea. I've had it validated by these lawyers. It's only the cost that's prohibiting me doing it, and not having the right business partners. I say only, they're huge things, obviously. But I was just like, look, I'm going to plunge. This is an investment for the future. If it pays off big. If it doesn't, sure, look, I've lost $5,000, and you only try these things. You got to try these things. If you don't, you're never going to succeed. And that's my mindset.
Yeah. That's interesting. Moving through, because that's kind of a follow-on question from that then. So you spoke about like your business partners and how they were a little bit more business-minded and that type of thing. So were you a contractor? Is that what you say your role was within nutrition? You had like different jobs around the UK. So you were self-employed in a sense. Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
So was it a premeditated thing of you kind of going down to, I can't remember the company name where you met these guys. Was that a premeditated, I want to be around these, business guys? Or was it kind of, you're the right people and I just happen to be in the same room? Like, because networking can kind of be random, or it could be like really sought after. How did that work for you?
It was actually both column A and column B. So what happened was, my supervisor, Professor Graham Close, still good friends of him now, he was rang by Raj, who is my now CEO and was the CEO of Goalmaster Fitness. He rang him because Graham is one of the best in the world nutritionists, obviously, you probably heard of him. And Graham didn't have the bandwidth to come on board. So Graham basically put Raj in touch with me. He said, I've got, a guy, he's just finished his PhD. He's worked in sports for a few years. He's the guy for you. Prior to that, Graham and I and other colleagues of ours, such as Dr. James Moorhen and others, if you know him too, we've always been talking about working in corporate. So we need to transition and transfer our skill sets from working with professional athletes, knowing the science and delivering that to athletes and delivering it to corporate, because there's a hell of a lot of crossover for health and wellness and whatnot. And the people out there delivering it, with complete respect, but PTs with nutrition certifications aren't the same as someone with a PhD in that area, obviously. But that's absolutely fine. They're fantastic at that particular job, but it doesn't go to the nth degree that we would go to. So therefore, there's a market for that in corporate. So we discussed it at length for months and months before that. So this opportunity came up essentially, and I didn't have Hytro in mind at all, or whatever I was calling it at that point in time. I just went because it was a good opportunity. And then I realized I've been sat on this patent application for a few months, and these guys know what they're doing. They're very well versed in business, very well connected, and their company was in a fitness wellness space. So obviously they had a passion for sports and fitness, and I got that from them when I met them. So that essentially just light bulb moment again. I was like, I'm going to pitch them this idea, and it wasn't so much of a sat down pitch with a chalkboard or presentation or anything. It wasn't so much of that. Although my chairman is pretty much a dragon from Dragon's Den, very impressive individual. But it was just an off-the-cuff conversation, but quite quickly it snowballed, and quite quickly you could just see eyes lighting up and light bulbs going off everywhere. And just, these are business people. They understand opportunity. They don't need to know what the product is at that point in time. They need to see the opportunity and value proposition in front of them, and that's what they did see. Now, there's a lot of due diligence, of course. They had to look into it like another sportswear brand. It's a saturated market, right? There's no way we'd have started a sportswear business. But this isn't sportswear. This is a product that we've made into sportswear to make it accessible. So there's a really unique selling point here. There's nothing that exists like this, hence the pattern. And therefore, we really have created a new category. We've created a way to make BFR used in different ways that you could never do before. Therefore, it's its own category. It's no longer rehab. It's recovery, it's performance, it's potentiation, it's preparation. All of those things couldn't be done without supervision before. Excuse me. But now it can be. So we've completely carved out our own category. So it's a bit like the massage guns when they came out. However, we own the patent, so there can't be any other massage gun brands coming to compete with us. So we've done the same thing, created a new category, but no one can compete. So it's a really exciting journey we're on, and those guys have basically made it happen. They've taken my idea and made it fruition.
That's mad, mate. It's exciting, and I think this was one of those things I was thinking last night. I was laid in bed, everything's going through your mind. I'm like, right, what am I making then? When I speak to Warren, what's the advice he's going to give me? What am I creating? And I can't even, it seems like such a mad concept to me, and it might make perfect sense to you now because you've got this product that's fully formed and you've done all the research, you've made it. Like, it's such an interesting thing thinking about inventing. I went on Google as well. I was looking through top tips for inventors, top tips for entrepreneurs and all that, and nobody really gives you anything, because it's one of the, you're looking at a problem, you've got to try and find a million and different solutions. Like, do you have any, I guess, after the fact tips or information on somebody who is wanting to kind of embark on a similar journey to you?
Yeah, we've actually had a recent conversation with a guy who's actually invested in Hytro, a friend of ours, and he also works in Formula One. I probably shouldn't name him because I've just said he's an investor. But essentially, he wants to start up a business. He's got a really good concept. He's a very clever guy doing a PhD, and it's in his PhD area, so it makes sense. He's done his market research. He's pulled together a slide deck. It all makes complete sense. The problem is there's so many unknowns that if you've never done it before, there's so many barriers in place that you have to circumvent, and you have to fail so many times, and you make the wrong decisions so many times, but you learn from them. But if you can minimize the amounts of wrong decisions you've made, then you're onto a winner, really. And we made a lot, right? We did have good advice and good advisors on board, but we made a lot still, and it took us time to pivot, which is really important. As soon as there's a problem, pivot. If it's an unsolvable problem and you need to change your tact. So what we wish we'd have had is someone to advise us from the very beginning, someone who'd done it before. So my advice to someone who wants to invent is, if you're in the luxurious space where you know someone, fantastic, speak to them, just ask them. And you can almost guarantee that if they're a founder of a startup or they've been through a startup experience, they will help you. And the reason being is they've been there, they know how difficult it is and how much advice matters. If you're a big corporation, they don't give a shit about people, typically speaking. But if you've been through that startup process, you know how hard it is for people. And that's why we've sat with this gentleman, and we're going to help him throughout his journey, because there's so much we learned that we wish we knew before. And if we had have known it, we would have honestly saved so much money and so much time. So yeah, the advice would be, if possible, find someone who's been through that journey. I know that's easier said than done, but if that's on the table, speak to them, grab them by both hands and have a chat, and they should be willing to help. Again, further to that, it's set up a company with people that have different skill sets to you. So without the skill sets that three co-founders have in Hytro, we just wouldn't exist. So without my scientific knowledge, my publications, my network in professional sports, it obviously wouldn't exist. Without Raj's ability to manage a team and extensive experience in London, we wouldn't. And same for Paul. He ran Gibson Dunn, and in London, he's a massive international M&A lawyer. Without his contacts and networks and investment and the skill sets, none of us would be where we are, right? So if you can find people to plug the gaps that you don't have, that's critical, that's crucial. And that's just the very final point on that would be advisors. So we actually have quite a lot of advisors, and we're pretty lucky because of our individual networks. They're very highly respected individuals. So, for example, we'd have people like Pete McKnight, who's the director of Hinsa Performance Formula One. So he's an advisor because of my network. You know, we have Pam Jackson, who's CEO of Level 20 in London, you know, through Paul's network. We have Lacol's CEO, Yanto Barker. We have Skin's ex-CEO, Jamie Fuller. You know, all advisors to the business. So, and plenty more, you know, loads more. Sorry, I haven't named them if you're listening, guys. There's just loads. But bringing them involved so many incredible skill sets to the table and different points of view and different questions and different experiences. That's what it's all about. If you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult. So building that quickly is important, in my opinion.
Well, mate, your opinion definitely counts, because look at where you are and look what you've kind of done so far. And it hasn't happened by accident. You know, there's obviously been a driving force and a strategy with this. And again, I think we spoke about it previously, but it seems like the network has been a really powerful tool here, you know. And I know 2 people individually that, you know, work with you guys, with John Noonan and Dan Howells, you know, that are just, you know, believe in the brand and they're pushing it. And I think that's such a clever thing from your perspective as well, because you've got industry professionals that are well respected, that are preaching that, and that's such a powerful thing. You get trust in the brand, you get trust in the process. And I think, yeah, as quality, was that a premeditated thing as well? Was that your way of thinking, okay, the way we're going to kind of get it out there through this kind of spiderweb system of networking? Was that something you thought about, or is it just kind of happened?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a couple of answers to this, but I'll start with the first one. So that is my network, essentially, into professional sports. So as I said, we all bring different skill sets to the table. I came with the professional sports arm. So John, I've been friends with him for, you know, nearly a decade. We're at LJMU together. Dan Howells was actually my boss at England Sevens. He was, you know, obviously head of strength and conditioning, or my line manager, and now colleague. But those were existing relationships, and John, obviously knowing me, believed in me immediately. He obviously knows about BFR. He could see the utility and value straight away, but because he believed in me, he was like, this is insane. This is such a good idea. I'm in. And not only that, they both invested in the company. So what we're inevitably finding is people who have been close to the company from the beginning, and even along the way, if they're really bought into the idea, they've actually invested in the company as well. And what that's allowed us to do is they have a vested interest. They want to talk about Hytro. They want people to know about it. And it's genuine advocacy. You know, they only invested because they're genuine advocates. They didn't do it for a quick buck. They saw an opportunity and said, this is going places. We want to be involved in this. And therefore what you build is this network of advocates that are really credible. And obviously if they're an army of people going out there to their respective clubs, to conferences, and people are talking about Hytro, they're like, oh, Hytro, yeah, they're great, blah, blah, blah. It's just that awareness grows quicker. And we recently did a raise on Cedar's platform. So we're always raising. Obviously, as a startup company, we always need capital to move forward. But we did a really successful raise on Cedar's, which was specifically for professional coaches. And the reason we did that was because, well, one, obviously gets a little bit of money in the coffers. We didn't look for too much. We didn't want to take too much away from the venture capitalists and the angels. What we wanted to do is give an opportunity to those in our network and industry who wanted to get involved, because twofold, they have an opportunity to be involved and obviously see the upside when hopefully the company goes to a huge valuation. And two, we then have advocacy from so many professional coaches. So we have, you know, Formula One coaches, we have Premier League, heads of performance, we have Championship, Rugby, Premiership, International Rugby, Cricket. You know, we have incredible individuals from the top echelons of sport involved in Hytro. When you look at the list, honestly, it's really impressive. I couldn't believe it. If you'd said that to me 2 years ago, I'd have been like, no way. But like, we've got some of the best names in the industry in the UK and abroad who've invested in the company because they believe in it. And that shows you where it's pointing toward. So, yeah, I can't even remember what the original question was. Was it premeditated?
Yeah.
Yes, but it was by design, because the 10-year history that I have in sport led to this, essentially. Yeah. Without Hytro wouldn't have happened, essentially. Like without Raj's experience, the management side, that wouldn't have happened. You need to slot them together and then it works.
Yes, guys, just going to take a short break in the podcast with Warren. Hope you're enjoying the chat. I know I did. Just want to remind you about the online Adapt strength and conditioning based service. So if you are a coach or an athlete that is looking to take your physicality and performance to the next level, give us a shout. We are currently full. We do have a waiting list, okay? And we utilize that waiting list quite a lot. So if there is an available spot, we go to the waiting list before we put it out on social media. So if you're looking to do that, give us a shout. We have just put out our final part to our Performing on Comp Day series, okay? So it's a 3-part webinar where we basically try to give you as much education as possible in, how to actually make sure that come rugby match day, come the race day, whatever that thing is that you are, ready for it, okay? And we work off the 3 Fs model, okay? And the 3 Fs model work on making sure that you are fit, okay? So we talk through all the information to do with deloading and peaking and how you can make sure that you are taking care of that. The second one is focus, so a little bit more of a psychology element to visualization, making sure that you are prepared mentally. And then the final one, which is the one we just released this week, is fueled, okay? Making sure that you are giving your body all the fuel it needs, hydration, carbs, protein, whatever that is, depending on your current situation, to maximize your performance on game or match day. Okay, so if you are somebody who's looking for an all-inclusive, kind of like a holiday experience when it comes to strength and conditioning and are looking to take things up, give us a shout, drop me a message, and I can stick you on the waiting list for the next athlete to join the Adapt team. All right, thank you very much. Let's get back into the episode with Warren. Yeah. Mate, I don't know if you've seen the Steve Jobs speech that he speaks around typography. Have you seen that?
Gosh. Well, I've seen a couple of his films, so I've probably seen a reference to it. I can't remember, though.
So what it was, I think it was like a graduation ceremony, and obviously the creator of Apple, and he was basically speaking around the concept that he dropped out of one of his classes in school, and he decided that he wanted to do something different just for pure enjoyment, that was kind of against the grain. So he went and did something around calligraphy, and writing and finding some frilly fonts and all those things. And, fast forward 2, 3, 4, 5 years, when he's kind of fighting Apple versus the PC, the thing that separated Apple from the PC was actually the different fonts and the typography. And he was like, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots that have led you to where you are looking backwards. And that's essentially what you're saying there is you are where you are in a way. Obviously, there's been many other things that have come along with it, but because of that network and how you've met different people along the way, and you've just managed to kind of draw almost a straight line, but obviously in the moment, it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
I just think it's a mad thing.
It is a really good point, and that's something I've always been aware of in my practice is it's my character as well as just me as a person. I've got ADHD, and this was diagnosed when I was like 4, so I'm not one of the recent people who've just pre-diagnosed themselves. Always meant that, excuse me, I've had a very, very active mind, which obviously helps with brainstorming for Hytro. But also, I just love relationships with people. I love being friendly with people. I love connecting with people. I'll go out of my way to do it. I'm that person at a conference that just speaks to everyone. And obviously, I never had Hytro in mind 10 years ago. But what has inevitably happened is I've created so many relationships over the past 10 years. Every club I've worked at, I feel like I've made some good friends. I've worked at 8 or 9 clubs, quite a lot now. And obviously they go to different clubs and they go to different clubs, and I think it's just been my personality, I guess, but it's allowed me to make so many strong relationships. I guess the point I'm trying to make, just be kind to people, be open to discussions with people, don't be closed off, don't have a massive ego, because you're obviously just going to close doors. You never know what's around the corner. And even just, who cares what's around the corner? Just in the moment, just be a good dude, right? Just be a good person, and hopefully karma comes around and something good comes your way.
Yeah, for sure. I want to go back as well, actually, mate, to when you were first creating Hytro and you were going through this brainstorming process then. So you identified the problem of, it's not very accessible and all that. What was did you hire somebody? Did you do a lot of the early legwork? Were you playing around with stuff? Was it drawings? How did that look? What was the creative process?
Yeah, I was really lucky that my partner, Claudia, she's incredible at drawing. Excuse me. She's incredibly crafty as well. So I told her my idea and my concepts of what I thought I was looking for and like what I needed it to look like. I couldn't even conceive of how to draw this, and she drew it, and I was like, that's it. That's exactly what I want the mechanism to look like. So we went down the shops and bought an Under Armour t-shirt. Excuse me, I'm really sorry. Sorry. So I bought an Under Armour t-shirt. I bought some elastic, some Velcro, some pins, stuff like that. I've actually still got the original. It's not a prototype. It was just basically me in the spare room with Claudia. We bought a sewing machine. But what we did to begin with is I don't know if people are watching or listening, but we folded up the sleeve of the t-shirt and embedded and stitched it together to make like a housing, put a hole in it, and got an elastic band, essentially like a material band like you would have kind of on the top of kind of a pair of shorts.
Yeah.
And threaded that through, secured it by sewing it in, added some glue, some Velcro patches on the end, just to see how it would work and which way to do it and what, just to get a feel of how the functionality would work. So that was kind of, the very, very first concept and idea of making the product. So my missus drew it. We then went and bought the equipment to make it, and it was crude as hell. But it wasn't for 15 or 16 months until we actually got to a point where we had a first prototype of the product. It took so long to do. And the reason is I didn't understand the barriers. So, for example, we went to London to try and get the expertise to do it. No one could do it. It was far too complex. It's such a unique and innovative product. No one had the expertise to do it. And further to that point, it has to be in such a specific way you stitch it and the angling so that it's safe. So BFR has to be in the right position for safety. So it's angled to a specific degree. It's put as close to the crotch as possible. And that's to ensure that the occlusive stimulus is, number one, standardized across the whole limb, but number two, in the right position at the very most proximal point. Obviously, when we started that, we didn't know that. So that was learnings along the way. And to get that angling correct took so many different iterations to do it, because you have to make it, test it, no good, make it again, test it, no good. So they couldn't do it in London. And then by chance, someone who started to work with us called Tim Clark, fantastic guy now in Australia. So he started the company with us, and his uncle was manufacturing stuff out in Portugal and selling on eBay, I believe. So he said, I've got this really cool manufacturer out in Portugal. They're called AAC, a guy called Paulo. He said, I'll introduce you. He might be interested in having a look at this because he's into kind of cool, quirky stuff. And so we went there. He's making Balenciaga, Gucci, he's making Burberry, he's making some incredible, products for some massive brands. So he's a really big, established textile expert in Portugal. I think he's got like 8 factories that work under him, kind of thing. So we've gone there, very impressive setup. We've come with the concepts, and we wanted him to make it. And he said, look, I've got no room to take on any clients, but he quickly realized the opportunity, and he was like, this is different. He's making leggings, he's making jackets, he's making whatever, which is all, he's making a fortune. Yeah. But this is different, and you want a bit of excitement sometimes. So he was like, do you know what? I'm getting rid of, I think it was something like Ted Baker at the time, I can't remember, so don't quote me. He's getting rid of one of his clients because he needed more room. It's like, we'll take you on. Then it was a process of over 12 months to create this product. It took a long time. Myself and Raj and my partner Claudia went out to Portugal a few times just to stress test and pick materials and fabrics and whatnot. And we've ended up with a product that has patented Velcro that's come from Japan with materials that are almost prohibitively expensive. They're really, really good quality materials, which obviously makes the manufacturing cost quite high. But we wanted a good, high quality product, like an Apple product essentially, so that it's just beautiful to look at. It's nice to wear. It's not your typical BFR that's uncomfortable. It's a new thing. It's BFR, but comfortable and accessible and easy to do and safe to do. There's a whole another kettle of fish. But it was the guys in Portugal that essentially helped us make it. And I remember some crazy mechanisms we were trying. We must have tried 20 different mechanisms, like magnetism, buttons, bra clasps, all sorts of crazy things. And we actually ended back up with the Velcro because it was the most simple, sleekest way to do it. And then that's when we went down to finding a patented Velcro that was extremely low profile. It's so soft to touch. So by the way, I'm touching it now. That's why I saw off screen. It's so soft. It's incredibly strong. You wouldn't think it could even stick when you look at the two parts. You're like, how do they even work? But it's because it's such an incredibly good Velcro, essentially. So yeah, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of iterations, and then we finally got to the MVP, so the minimal viable product, the one we were happy to start with. And then since then, we've obviously improved it, but that's been through another iterative approach of clubs have come back to us and said, this was an issue, or, we like this, or can you change this? And then we've changed it with future products.
I saw, and I might be wrong in terms of the timeline with this, but I think the first time I saw about Hytro was during COVID. That's when I kind of saw it like picking up traction, at least on social media, and I had some friends that were buying things. Was that the release, or was it just because, people were looking for accessible options to, still get bigger and still get stronger?
I mean, if you think about what BFR does, it allows you to, get bigger, stronger, more powerful, improve endurance, recover without using any equipment. You literally use your own body weight, and it gives you a similar adaptation like you're squatting 100 kilos. It's a really incredible technique. Again, proven by thousands of research papers. So for lockdown, I wish we'd released the products a year earlier and had more awareness, because it could have blown up. It could have been one of those things that were like, this is what you train with at home. Because people were buying, I bought a gym bench, 180 quid. It's rubbish. It's a piece of shit, basically. It's like broken. But you couldn't get anything for love of the money. I couldn't get weights, couldn't get anything. If we'd have had Hytro out, you don't need that stuff. You literally don't need it. You can do body weight. And I can talk to a few of the clubs that are doing that, and Formula One teams that just use body weight for training with Hytro in a bit. But the point is, it's proven scientifically to increase muscle size and strength with just body weight. So if we'd have done that in lockdown, we'd have made a killing. Unfortunately, you might have seen a few people purchasing, but it was a really difficult year. Launching in lockdown in COVID was not conducive for good sales because the awareness wasn't there yet. And I think there was a lot of education that needed. There still is. And the reason we're a B2B brand selling straight to professional sport clubs, and we don't at the moment bother with consumers or focus any marketing on consumers, it's because they still need education. There's people like yourself who definitely get it, people who are in the industry. But the vast majority of people still don't get it. We can say, this grows muscle quickly by strapping in. They're still like, I don't really get it, so they're not going to buy it. So, there might be a couple who bought it in lockdown, but that education piece needed to come for that to have worked. Yeah. And one of the biggest pivots we made, as I just kind of mentioned, is going straight for B2B. So we did try B2C for a while as consumers. We just realized that no one was really up the education curve, and we needed to do that. We needed to educate people, and that was a heavy, heavy lift and a heavy expense. And then we realized, well, professional clubs are buying 20, 30 units at once. Let's just focus on professional sports, create a good sports business. And then once we have, which we do have now, we've got a lot of traction in professional sports, we can start to look back at consumers and use the stories we've created with professional athletes and teams and say, look, England rugby, look, USA national football team at the World Cup, here you go, they're using it. Then people buy into it. They're like, oh, my superstar that I know is using it, therefore I get it. Prior to that, it was a very difficult sell.
Man, it makes perfect sense when you lay it out like that. But I bet in the moment, it's like, why are these people not buying the thing? I don't know if that was like stuff you were racking your brain over, but now it makes perfect sense. But that's after the fact, isn't it? So, that makes so much sense to me. With Hytro being your baby, essentially, this is your creation, it's your child, your brainchild. Are you still are you the guy, essentially? Are you the one that's kind of pushing everything forward? Are you, like, basically, where I'm getting at with this is, in my my sleepless night last night when my brain was turning, I was thinking of invention. I was on a YouTube montage of Elon Musk, and he was speaking through, what it's like to create a business, and you're going through this turmoil sometimes where you're like, fuck, I've put in so much money into this thing or so much time and energy. If it doesn't work out, what do I do? And he's kind of speaking through those types of things. Have you had similar feelings? Do you sleep? Are you okay now? Can you relax? Can you take 2 weeks off? Like, where are you at in that stage of your career and development, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, start by saying I'm not the guy at all. The team is great. Like, we're completely equals in the team. Myself, Raj, and Paul, the three co-founders, all own pretty much the exact same amount of shares in the company. it's a 2 out of 3 decision for anything, inevitably, because we all get on. Everything's 3 out of 3 anyway. We all vote the same way. But yeah, I'm not the guy. I guess I would be the guy that's rolled out in front of people to present or go on a podcast or speak to a professional team.
Yeah.
But I'm certainly not the guy that goes on a business podcast or, goes and gets investment. That's, although I obviously dip into that, of course I do. We all help one another in every area. You have to. It's the nature of a startup. But yeah, I guess we're each of the guy in certain areas of the business, but we just collaborate very, very well. I mean, even like CMO Rich, he was at Nike for 12 years or something as a marketeer. Absolutely phenomenal. Without him, we wouldn't be where we are today either. Again, he's not a director in the company, but he would be the guy in marketing. He's fantastic. And we have various other staff that are incredible too. So yeah, just for the guy comments about, I think we're all kind of on equal footing. Sorry, remind me what the second part of that question was. I went about it all.
As somebody who invented the product and was one of the front runners, and essentially at the start it was kind of your baby, are you able to kind of switch off from the business side of things?
Yeah, so again, with the ADHD, my mind's always going. So I've actually suffered with insomnia for decades. I can't remember the last time I actually slept properly. Now, it's something I manage because I'm so used to it. So it's not a problem at all at the moment. But I do find in periods of high stress, it becomes a problem because the mind's thinking anyway. I can't help that. It's always just ticking. So if there's a stressful situation in the day or I've got something to do tomorrow, I'll be really thinking about it in bed and I just don't sleep. So I need to find ways to manage that. I have used things like the Calm app and Headspace app, and they do actually work a lot. I find things that just take focus of my mind on something really useful. So if I can just listen to a book or listen to a soundscape, it's stopping me thinking about anything else. So although I'm still thinking, it's focusing my thinking on one thing as opposed to 100 things, which that's probably just typical to me or someone that suffers from ADHD. I don't know because I'm not in anyone else's head. But focusing on one thing is the one thing that helps me get to sleep, essentially. But mate, it's a startup. We make wrong turns all the time. We make bad decisions, but on net balance, we just need to make more good decisions than we make bad. So inevitably, there's periods where we're really stressed. When we're raising money, we could be down to the last couple of months of money before we actually run out of cash runway, and we're like, well, what happens then? What would happen is myself and Raj have to continue with Hytro, of course, but get a job to actually pay the bills at home while running the business, which is just not conducive for getting the business scaling. So there's periods when we're raising, we're like, shit, we really need to get angels in at the moment. And the problem's been for us with raising is the idea is incredible. The patent is obviously extremely valuable. You can see the traction we've got. We're doing incredibly well with awareness and whatnot. Clearly, it's a viable, great business. However, until revenues hit, somewhere in the 100,000 mark or something a month, the big companies don't really look at investing. So we actually have to rely on angel investors really at this stage. We're kind of in between. We're kind of at venture capitalist stage now, but we weren't, and we were trying
angels. What are angels?
It's Yeah, so just individuals who want to invest. So it could be high net worth or it could be anyone. So any individual who's invested is an angel investor. But VCs, venture capitalists, are firms that have an investment thesis and they'll invest, but they'll typically start at ticket sizes of, it can go lower, but like 1 million to 10 million or something or more. But angels can put in 10 grand. You don't have to put in £1 million thing. So the Seeders platform thing was actually a different kettle of fish altogether. We removed the minimum entirely, so it could just be a £10 buy-in, but it was a one-off opportunity for coaches to get in. And we raised 150 grand through that. And it was 50 coaches and then a few additional people, varying between 500 quid to 15, 20 grand. Some of them put in, so, whatever they can afford, I guess. But yeah, the typical investment, the VC investment's a lot higher ticket size. But the point I'll circle back to is that you need enough revenue to unlock those conversations. So you can have the conversations and they're really impressed by you, the team, what you're doing, the pattern and whatnot. But they'll just have a metric, a tick box. So it'll be like, you need to have 100K revenue a month or something like that. Because we're not quite there yet, it's a very difficult conversation. There are those that will obviously invest, but you just need to find them like diamonds in the rough. And we are finding American VCs are a lot more receptive because the UK market's awful to raise in.
Okay.
which is why we are raising with angels still at the moment. We've got some, really decent angels coming on board, hopefully some athletes at the moment too. We've just had Sam Warburton, obviously legend, British and Irish Lions captain. He's just come on board as well and invested. So that's great, but we still need to hit that tick box metric for big companies to come in. So that's the difficulty, because this is working, we're scaling, is working, but you won't come in because you need this box ticked. So that's the frustration really with investment. So that's why, as I said, sometimes it's heightened stress because we've got 2 or 3 months left of a cash runway. We can see what's happening. The company is doing great, but you won't come in because we need to tick a box. So yeah, that's the nature of being in a startup.
And what I guess with that then is, and this might be the question where you tell me to piss off. What's the long game with this? Is this something you're going to be doing, for forever? Are you going to eventually get it to a point where you're really happy with it and you take a step back, or you sell it and you do something else and you retire? What does that look like for you? And, I guess you can't speak for everybody, but the other guys as well.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty well aligned, to be honest, the 3 co-founders. So we want to sell as quickly as possible. So we're hoping that's within 3 to 5 years, essentially. And we want to build as much brand equity in that time as possible and extend into a few different markets for that to be possible. So we're exploring the medical market, and we think that's the biggest opportunity. Because obviously anyone who's had hip or knee replacement, ACL, MCL, sarcopenia, osteopenia, AIDS, cancer, all sorts of things are impacted by Hytro BFR. Elderly, when they can't walk properly, if you use the walking called zero frames, if you walk with one of them with BFR applied, you're actually going to regenerate muscle tissue and bone mineral density, so they can then walk unassisted. So there's so many different places this can go, and we're exploring the regulatory pathways and ways to advance in those demographics at the moment. And we're looking to expand into those in probably 2025, 26. It could happen a lot earlier, but we see that as where the big piece of the pie is. Pro sports is actually quite a small industry. It's quite niche. We could still create $100 million company, perhaps, in the sports industry, or perhaps a $50 million. That was actually a bit pushing it there. But you can make a decent-sized company in professional sports, basically, especially when you own a patent and we can dominate that market. But when you're talking medical, it's just, the numbers are through the roof. You can create $1 billion company overnight, pretty much, if you start getting huge contracts. So that's where we want to go. Also, for me personally, although my background's sports and it's a passion of mine, I really, really want to help people medically. If my product or our product can actually give life quality back to millions of people, I mean, that's amazing, right? That's a huge bucket list tick that not many people can tick off. Even if I was just to help one demographic, such as the elderly, it gives them mobility and quality of life back in a care home. It's a huge industry. And if we could just that one, I'd feel great about what we've achieved here. And of course, the pro sports business is going really well, so that's always going to be there. So that's great. I'm happy with that. But the future, I hope, is medical, essentially. We're also looking at military, because obviously the obvious implications for training on the road or training, wherever they are, or covering or rehab. There's a lot of applications for the military. And again, that's just another level again to professional sports because of the contract sizes and the number of military personnel across all, America, for example. You get a contract with them, the US military, that's nuts. And what we're doing there is we're working with other companies who already have contracts. So we're piggybacking on their contract, and basically they're already in. So they'll then add Hytro into their contracts, and that's what we're looking at doing. So yeah, the future, 3 to 5 year sell, hopefully. Probably selling it in parts, if I'm honest. So for example, for the consumer market, Nike, Under Armour, Adidas may want to take this product so they can sell it to their existing customer base. It's really easy for them to plug in and go. Here's a new product, throw it into their website, throw it into a bit of a marketing campaign. They've already got the data on the people. They know who to send it to in terms of marketing. Bang, you've got 100 million people or more. I don't know how many people they have seeing the product. We can't do that. So if they buy the product from us and buy the consumer arm of the business and license it, immediately they've got a huge revenue stream. But then we could keep medical. We could just keep the contracts for medical because they're a lighter lift once they're in place. So the answer is I don't know, really. The plan is 3 to 5 years, sell either partially or fully the company. But anything could happen in that time. We could have an offer from someone for a smaller amount than we want, but because it's sufficiently big enough, we might be like, "Do you know what? Fine,
It's now
put
money.
3 or 4 years in. Yeah, it's now money." And I just don't know is the answer, but there's a lot of opportunity and options on the table, I would say.
Yeah. So you couldn't, I guess, see yourself. Could you do this again? Could you get yourself into kind of a business headspace doing a different product in the future? Is it going to be, you know what, I'll use that money for retail, or I'm just going to live comfortably and just do a passion thing for a while? Like you personally, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if and touch wood it happens, and who knows, let's not let the ego get away with us here. But if hypothetically we did sell in 5 years from now, I'd be 37, right?
Yeah.
So it's hopefully retirement money type thing. But what I'd want to do is you can't retire at 37, right? You've got to do things with your life. You've got so much time left. So I've always spoke about going back into professional sports because it was a passion of mine, but it wouldn't be on the same capacity. It might be one club for a couple of days a week just to scratch that itch. Then, of course, the money wouldn't matter at that stage. It's just helping. But then I just don't know what opportunities may come up along this journey. Like obviously meeting Paul and Ralph themselves, their networks are incredibly extensive. There could be an opportunity there that we all want to explore together. It could be an investment opportunity for us. We could want to set up, myself and Raj have talked about setting up a charity or charities in the future. Like that would be a passion play for me. So again, I don't want to get too sidetracked thinking about what ifs, because what if this actually didn't take off? What if this did actually, that one in 10 startups work out, 9 in 10 fail. We're probably, hopefully, that threshold. I don't know. Couldn't tell you for sure yet, but it could fail. There could be something drastic that happens that makes it flop for whatever reason. I can't envisage it, but if it did, I can't be thinking like, what am I going to do in the future with a load of money? I've got to think, so who knows? The world is always still
sick. Cool, mate. I'm going to wrap it up there, mate, because I think that's a good point to kind of finish on, where you're speaking around, ultimately coming back to passion and doing things that you enjoy and helping people. I think that's a really nice finishing touch on where you're currently at and this chapter in the business in your life. For anybody that doesn't, kind of know where you are and everything, where can we find you on social media, and where's the best place to kind of find out a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. So you can obviously head to the Hytro Instagram handle. So it's just at Hytro _. You'll find me if you type in Hytro, because I'm Warren _Hytro, narcissistically. The website, though, go to the website, hytro.com. And if you are an elite athlete or an elite team, there's a pro sports side of the website. Just click on pro sports. But yeah, feel free to get in contact through the website or even on Instagram. I'm more than happy to speak with you through that. I'll get one of the teams to speak with you. So yeah, I'd be delighted to speak to anyone who wants to talk about their athletes or their teams.
Perfect. Nice one, mate. Thank you very much. I'll put all that info in the show notes below for anybody that wants it. But again, just want to thank you, mate, for coming on and chatting us through your journey. I think, to me, that's super... It's inspirational in a really interesting way, just looking at you as a case study and kind of the steps that you've gone through and the hoops that you've jumped through, and how it definitely hasn't really just been a straight line. It's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure people will enjoy that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for the kind words and for having me on, Jordan. It's been great.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, buddy.